Hey guys, this week is Holy Week, so we're going to try something a bit different for our Bible study this week. We have been looking at Caleb, but as it's the week leading up to Easter, we're going to have a look at four of the characters that appear in the Easter story. And the idea is that as we look at these characters, we'll have a chance to think about their lives and their story and how that might relate to our life and our story. And then we'll have a chat afterwards on Zoom. And just discuss who these characters were and who we feel we can relate to. So the religious leaders you might have heard some stuff about before. Basically, they're well known for following rules. The problem was, and Jesus talked about this on many occasions, that they kind of missed the point behind it. So they'd be following these rules in a really legalistic way, but they never really knew God. During Holy Week, these were the people who were really against Jesus and ultimately ended up being the reason that he went to the cross. They were really upset at the fact that Jesus had broken the rules and wanted to punish him. I wonder whether we ever feel like we're kind of going through the motions of Christianity without really understanding or tuning in with the heart and the reason behind it. We've then got Judas. Judas is a really curious character because he'd spent 3 years as one of Jesus's disciples, one of his closest friends and followers. He'd seen everything that Jesus had done and heard everything that he'd taught, and he'd had all of this time to get to know him personally as a friend. And yet when it came down to it and he was offered money, he decided to betray Jesus, and he decided that a relationship with him wasn't worth it and he'd rather take the cash. I wonder whether some of us sometimes feel like following Jesus just isn't worth it and isn't a priority. I wonder whether there are other things that get in the way and seem more appealing to us. The third character we want to look at is Peter. Now, Peter was one of Jesus' closest friends. Like Judas, he'd had all of those years to spend with Jesus and learn from him and see everything that he did. And Peter was adamant that he would never let Jesus down and he would always be a friend to him and always have his back. The thing is, when it came down to it and Jesus was going to the cross, we know the story, and Peter denied him 3 times. He was afraid and he was embarrassed and he didn't know what the people around him would think. I wonder whether that's something we can relate to. Despite really loving Jesus, do we ever experience fear or embarrassment about the reaction of people around us? And finally, we read about the women. We don't really hear that much about them. But what we do know is that after Jesus died and was put into the tomb, the women came and they brought their oils and herbs to anoint his body. It kind of seemed like all hope had been lost, and yet they still came to do the most loving thing that they knew how to do. They didn't understand the situation, and yet they still chose to love Jesus. I wonder whether that is something we can relate to. Whether we're ever in a situation that we really don't get and don't understand, and yet we still find a way to choose to love him. So at 6:30 today, we are going to meet up on Zoom like we often do on a Monday now. And I want us to have a chat about these characters and who you feel you can relate to. Maybe you can relate to all of them. But have a think. So remember, we had the religious leaders who follow all the rules but don't really get it. We had Judas, who decided that Jesus wasn't worth it and other things were more of a priority. We had Peter, who really loved Jesus, but was weighed down by fear and embarrassment because of other people. And then we had the women, who we don't hear that much about, but we know that even in a really confusing and tough situation, they chose to find a way to still love Jesus. I'll see you in a bit.